Okay, welcome to the presentation about the City of Rochester's Community Choice Aggregation Program. Thank you for joining us. My name is Susan Hughes Smith, and I am one of the 4 partners at Rocktricity. So if you ever reach out to us, you might get a hold of me or my partners, Melissa Carlson, Ben Freevert, or Margie Pete. Our small company is located in the City of Rochester, and our job is to be the program manager for community choice aggregation programs in the greater Rochester region. We are partnered with Jewel Assets. You'll see their symbol down at the bottom of your screen. And Jewel is one of 4 New York State approved CCA administrators. So our 2 companies are working with the City of Rochester to implement a program that meets their sustainability goals. So this evening, I will review what community choice aggregation is, the benefits of CCA, what organizations can implement this type of program, how it works, the steps to implement CCA, and then we'll touch on what community distributed generation is, or community solar, and the benefits of that. So I'm really going to speak about 2 ideas. The first being community choice aggregation, and then a small portion about community solar. Both of these programs can work together, even under the authority of community choice aggregation. So before I get into the technical details of community choice aggregation, we just would like to pause and review where our electricity comes from, so you can understand why it's important to use these types of programs. So according to the EPA's Power Profiler, the mix on our electric grid includes almost 1/3 fossil fuel generated electrons. Then there's the nuclear power plant, hydroelectric power, and a small portion of wind energy. So our goal with community choice aggregation is to change the way we prioritize the generation of electrons. Our bills for electricity, that's what we kind of see and think about when we're thinking about electricity. And our bills include 2 parts, a delivery part and a supply part. The delivery section is what RG&E does for us on our behalf, and that role isn't going to change. RG&E is in charge of the lines and the wires and the billing. If there's a problem with your electricity, you would still call RG&E. What community choice aggregation does is look at the supply portion of the bill. It tries to aggregate electric demand so that we can get better rates for electricity and better rates for renewable electricity. In general, our supply rate is quite low in upstate New York. Compared to other parts of our state, compared to other parts of the country, we generally have had lower supply charges. But if you try to go on the market for renewable energy yourself, you'll discover that that increases the price. So by using this tool, this community choice aggregation program, we can hopefully access renewable energy for much more competitive rates, for prices that would be equal to or less than what we're paying RG&E to purchase on our behalf. So this little diagram is demonstrating what's kind of happening, the big picture without CCA. You can see that we have traditional generators, right? And so in this part of the grid, it's about 1/3 fossil fuel power plants creating those electrons, nuclear power, hydro, and they put the electrons on wires, and those wires are part of the grid. And the utility then is tasked with ensuring that those electrons get to all the end customers, right? They're looking after those wires and those lines and fixing things that need repair. We, on the other hand, pay the bill. And there are two green lines here because we're paying both a delivery part of the bill, and that is the amount that's going to stay with the utility, and we're paying the supply part of the bill. And that will go to the utility, but then the utility sends that money on to the generators of the electrons or the brokers of the generators of the electrons, usually called ESCOs. Okay, so that's without CCA. And now let's see what happens if we add CCA in a minute. Okay, so community choice aggregation is a program authorized by New York State. And the Public Service Commission is the body that approved or created the rules for community choice aggregation. And it allows municipalities to aggregate the energy demand and negotiate a bulk purchase. So in other words, all of the residents and all the small businesses in the city of Rochester are purchasing a certain amount of electricity. The municipality now has the authority to look at all that data and use it to go to the marketplace and say to the marketplace what we would like to have in terms of electric rates and the source of that generation. So all energy customers are eligible to participate in CCA, but some are automatically in the program. And that is described as opt-out treatment. If you're a very large energy user, say a university, the university might want to participate, but they would need to take an action to join the program, and that's called opt-in. Most large energy users already are able to get good electric rates because of their size. So community choice aggregation is really a program designed to help residents and small businesses access the same privileges that large energy consumers already have access to. So here again is our picture without CCA of the yellow line showing the flow of the electrons and the green line showing the flow of the money. And with CCA, our goal is to shrink the traditional generation and to add the renewable generation at much greater rates. Nothing else really changes about the picture. So we now have another line here, sure, for more electrons coming from a different source onto our grid. Our utility, RG&E, will still be responsible for ensuring that we all get the electrons through the wires. We're still going to pay one bill to the utility, but now the utility will send money back to the ESCO that gets selected, who's supplying us with renewable electricity. This is something that RG&E already does. It's a part of their everyday operations. So the benefits of community choice aggregation are shown here. On the left, you might see this little picture where the green line is the set price that we hope to get for community choice aggregation program, while the red dashed line is showing you what's happening in the marketplace, or in other words, what's happening for the utility. Utilities function under different rules than smaller energy supply companies. And as a result, the utility can only purchase at market rates. So every month, the rate for electrons can vary. And that's why you see in the picture, it's going up and down. In contrast, a community choice aggregation program can choose to set a fixed rate. And as you note, some months that fixed rate will be below, the market rate. In some months, it could be a little higher. And so how do you decide to fit to what a good CCA rate is deciding on, well, what you want to compare the CCA rate to. Okay, so I'll touch on that again in a minute. So what we're trying to achieve is a reduced electric rate for residents and small businesses. So again, how do you decide what that rate should be? Typically, if you're a business, you're looking at what's going to happen to the electric rates in the future. There's these future markets. And then you might, pin a rate compared to where you think the market's going. Typically in CCA programs, administrators have looked at historic rates. Well, what has happened with RG&E rates, let's say over the previous 2 years? Can we get a price that's similar or better than the last 2 years worth of rates? And there you're kind of making an assumption. You're saying, well, we're expecting that the rates in the future will look fairly similar to what the rates had looked in the past. So when you set that CCA rate, you're expecting to get at least some modest savings by doing so. It is not a guaranteed savings. It's just an expected savings. A third way to think about the problem is, well, for this product, what could an individual get on the open market? And in that comparison, CCA programs always deliver very favorable terms. So another advantage is simply the reduced volatility of a variable rate. We're moving away from having a different rate each month to having the same rate every month for a period of time, typically about 2 years. And that allows businesses and homeowners or renters to plan and have more control over their expected costs. Another goal is to use CCA to accelerate the transition to renewable energy, something the City of Rochester has committed to achieving through their climate action plan. We also hope to see this encourage local renewable energy development and grow jobs in our region. So who can authorize CCA programs? Well, the program is designed for whatever the smallest level of government is in your community that they would have to pass the CCA law. So in the case of the City of Rochester, it's the city itself. For some folks who live in a village within a town, both the village and town, or just the village would have to pass it, or the town would have to pass it. So simple for the City of Rochester. The City of Rochester has taken this action. They passed a local enabling law saying that they wanted to have the ability to explore pricing through CCA programs. And that law was passed previously within the last year and a half. Sometimes more than one municipality will work together to aggregate all of those different municipalities. In the case of the City of Rochester, the city is already big enough to have an influence on the market pricing all by themselves. So the Public Service Commission rules allows CCA programs to aggregate both electric supply and gas supply, or one or the other. In the case of wanting to facilitate action on climate change, having more affordable electricity is beneficial, while having cheaper gas, if not paired with a program to reduce gas, would have the opposite impact. So the city is likely to look at the electric supply first. That's what our companies have encouraged other municipalities to do, to deal with the electricity supply. And then as we create more innovative models that link gas with reduced demand, begin to implement those types of aggregations. So tonight, we're going to focus on the electric supply part. You can also include programs that incentivize energy efficiency and that incentivize other development of small generation. Hold on. And that's called distributed energy resources. So again, customers are enrolled in an opt-out basis, which means you don't take an action, you're just automatically included, at least most customers, but it has to be easy to opt out. That's a requirement of the Public Service Commission. So really, what CCA does is provide one more option for procuring electricity. So customers that already have chosen their own ESCO would not be automatically included, but would have to take an option to opt in. And we hope that the city will choose 100% renewable electricity as the default choice for the community. So this chart, this table, is showing all of the options that are going to be available to the community when it comes to electricity. So in this first row, it says that you want to choose to have RG&E purchase your electricity. Well, you can do that today. That's kind of the default. And you can do that if there's a CCA program. You would just have to leave the CCA program. If you want to choose your own ESCO supplier, you can do that today. Absolutely. Can you do that under a CCA? Yes, you also can do that, but you would leave the CCA program and then choose your own ESCO. So which of these programs helps us enjoy the benefits of bulk purchasing? Well, that's not currently available to residents and small businesses under either of the previous options, but it will be an option with community choice aggregation. In fact, that's the main feature of community choice aggregation. So again, we're back to thinking about what's on our grid today. On our grid today are electrons that are coming from a whole variety of sources. And when we know that the climate crisis is looming and needs to be addressed, what we're concerned about is that third coming from the fossil fuel power plants. So our goal is to eliminate that. And over time, this won't be, an instant thing where fossil fuel electrons disappear from the entire grid overnight, but by more and more communities prioritizing renewable generation, more renewable generation will get built. So CCA can help communities enjoy renewable sourcing, lower rates, and more options. So if you have questions, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen and type in your questions and we'll answer them now. You can also speak to us at another time at our office by phone, 585-244-0244, or you can send us an email at info@rochestercommunitypower.com. That's the CCA program name for the City of Rochester, Rochester Community Power. Okay, I think we're ready for any questions if we have some.
So yeah, there's one question that's come in, Sue. It says, I heard that certain low-income residents or residents enrolled in some public assistance programs would not be eligible for CCA. Is this true? Does income and/or enrollment assistance programs impact eligibility?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is that it will likely impact eligibility, but it really depends on what the CCA is able, what product they're able to access. So the Public Service Commission sets very strict rules around having to have guaranteed savings for HEAP program customers. And most CCA programs don't end up with what's a product that is a guaranteed savings, and instead end up with a fixed rate that's a projected savings. So we will likely go to bid for both types of electron products, but there hasn't yet been a CCA in the state where it was eligible for HEAP recipients. On the other hand, community solar programs, which we hope to incorporate into the CCA program, not too long after, or maybe even in concert with the default product, those programs are open to anyone and does have a guaranteed savings. So there will be more information on community solar later.
Great, here's another question, Sue. When is this happening? I'm using an ESCO now. How will I know when it's possible to make a change?
That is another excellent question. And it will be a few months in all likelihood. So we're required to do this public outreach period, and it lasts for 60 days. So over the next 2 months, we will be conducting 4 of these presentations, and there will be some social media posts sharing, basic FAQs about the program. And then once those 2 months are over, we have to have approval from the Department of Public Service to move on to the next stage. So in all likelihood, fairly early in 2021, we'll be going out to bid for the electricity. So it's a bit of a projection, but I would think maybe by March or April, around that time frame, we might have an idea of what a product would be, what prices and when it would start. So it's not starting right away, but hopefully within the coming months, early in 2021.
Well, that's it. Oh, no, here we got another one. Is this CCA, who are the decision makers? What kinds of decisions does each decision maker make? And what is the criteria they use to make their decisions about energy sourcing? Is there a mechanism for grassroots community input?
Sure, right. That's a really great question. So the decision makers that were involved in passing the enabling legislation was within the city staff in the environmental department of environmental services. And then they make a recommendation to the mayor and city council, and then the city council passed the local law. Mayor signs it. So the same folks will have input on what the terms are that you're looking for. What would make a good electric product for the city of Rochester. So if that's helpful.
Well, no further questions at the moment. So I guess, well, no, here we go. Now we've got another one. Responding to the note that there's no more questions. Okay, I've heard that there are some of these programs are guaranteeing 10% reduction in energy costs. It doesn't sound like that's what we're looking at here. I think this maybe gets to the distinction between the two programs, Sue.
Yes, so that is not what we're talking about. So community choice aggregation programs, as they've rolled out in New York State, have not had guaranteed savings. And mainly that's because we're asking energy companies to provide a fixed rate, which requires them to determine the amount of risk for the bid. So there aren't any CCA programs guaranteeing a 10% savings. Where community solar programs do guarantee a 10% savings. So if the city of Rochester decides to include a community solar offering, then folks may choose to subscribe to a solar field, and that would then give them a 10% savings off their entire electric bill. So that really is a great deal for customers. And ultimately, we are hoping that RG&E will be ready to consolidate. This gets kind of technical, but there are some things the utility has to do next year to make it possible for the city to just offer community solar to everybody without the individuals necessarily needing to take a specific action. But we're not ready to do that yet until RG&E has completed a particular task called consolidating the bill. So to be short and sweet, the 10% savings is over usually in a community solar program. And I would expect that the City of Rochester's CCA program will include a community solar offering, but that hasn't been finalized.
So next question, what happens to the gas supply side of the bill? Can you explain in more detail how CCAs can influence directly and or indirectly a transition off of gas for heating?
Yeah, sure. I mean, initially, CCA programs tend to focus just on the electricity because it's more straightforward. And when commodities are cheap, people tend to use it more. It's more complicated to connect a aggregation to a demand reduction program, but our partner Joule Assets has created some innovative approaches to doing that. In other words, if you needed to improve your home or your business in terms of its energy efficiency, you wanted to put in insulation, you could contract. Number one, you could contract in bulk for that work to be done, thereby creating lower costs for maybe a dozen houses that want to have more insulation put into it, for example. But you can also use the savings from gas use reduction to pay for those energy upgrades. So that's one model that Joule has used or proposed with other businesses, and is something that someday, hopefully not in the very distant future, that we could roll out within CCA communities.
So one more question just coming in here. You said that the goal of the program was to zero out the 30% of our power that's fossil fuel, but I've seen on other material for this that the program would achieve a 70% reduction, emissions reduction by 2030. Can you clarify?
I'm not sure what materials that you're referring to, but what I can say is New York State has passed a law called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And that law is requiring that 70% of our electricity comes from renewable sources by 2030. And that law is saying that any entity that serves the electric grid, so whether it's a utility making a purchase or the ESCOs that are selling to the grid, that 70% of that has to be from renewable sources. So community choice aggregation is just one of the strategies that the state of New York is incentivizing municipalities to consider to help them achieve that goal of a 70% renewable electricity supply. But it's not the only program that's being used. So something that we didn't touch on to that end is that communities that implement 100% New York State generated renewable electricity programs are expected to be able to qualify for more grant funding through NYSERDA. So right, NYSERDA is trying to encourage communities to go faster than the other kind of benchmark programs that the state is also using to kind of move our electric grid towards more and more renewable energy. So I think that's what that question was trying to get to. But if not, ask us another question.
You know, I think you basically hit that. Let's see, one more. Oh wait, thanks. Does that 70% reduction in the CLCPA include the gas system or not?
No, no. The CLCPA is saying that we need to get to an 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions statewide from all sources by 2050. And I think by 2030, I really haven't looked at that bill in a couple months. So, you know, take this piece with a grain of salt, but I think by 2030, they're only looking to achieve like a 40% reduction of emissions statewide. And I'm not confident in that percentage at all. I'll have to go back and look at the bill. But yeah, the electric grid is actually the easiest of all these tasks, because the other tasks include, you know, electrifying the transportation sector, which is a lot of individuals, and getting gas out of building heating, which means changing technologies as well as increasing energy efficiency. So the state is basically saying through the CLCPA, let's go faster with the electric grid, because that's really, in many ways, should be the easier piece of it.
Okay, well, that's the end of our questions, at least for the moment. So I'll leave it to you, Sue, as to whether or not you want to wrap it up or wait a minute.
Okay, maybe I will just go back to sharing screen and put our contact information back up for folks should they need it. And I should point out that there is an option for Spanish speakers. So if you're listening tonight and you have friends who prefer learning in Spanish, there will be 2 presentations in Spanish. The next one on November 30th, which will be, I believe, at 7 p.m. So that will be both sign language interpreted and in Spanish. And then there will be 2 presentations in December, one on December 9th, and then one on December 10th. And the December 10th one will also be in Spanish. And if you call the office line 585-244-0244, you can press the button to leave a message in Spanish, and someone will get back to you who speaks Spanish much better than I do. So, okay. And again, there's also email at info@rochestercommunitypower.com. Any language will, well, Spanish or English. If it's English, I'll probably answer it. If it's Spanish, we'll have someone else do it, or one of my partners. Okay, but you can reach us both ways.
Okay, well, no further questions coming in, Sue?
Okay, well, thanks for the help, Ben, and thank you very much, Allie, for your assistance with the sign language interpreting this evening. Have a good night, everyone.